All right, we are live again for the 4th episode. So welcome back. It is Monday, March 23rd. My name is Megan, and you are watching Disturbingly Interesting. It's a show where we talk about things that are strange, unusual, and probably a little questionable, but always disturbing. Today is, again, actually day 4 of this little challenge that I have set for myself of streaming every day for a week over the lunch hour. And as you can probably imagine, it is getting a lot harder to do as we go on. But Friday is going to be the last day of it. And then we're going to go to what I would probably consider like the normal scheduled programming, which I've not technically done yet. But there'll be the one live on Tuesday evenings. And then one of these lunch hour ones because I kind of like it. Every day is a bit much, but I do like it. So, yesterday, for the live yesterday, I had my first viewers while I was watching. I had two live viewers consecutively, and big shout out to Kathy. She was lighting up the chat, which was awesome because that was my first time managing it and looking to make sure that there are people on because she joined and I didn't see her because it's over here. And I'm looking over here. So just things that I take note of that I can keep track of. I am going to rearrange this setting after we're done with this daily stuff so that everything works a little better, hopefully. So we have no comments to go through today, which is okay. But today's episode, we are talking about some of the most disturbing castles from history and what happened with each of them to kind of give them that dark history reputation. This is also, would seemingly be, as I was going through my slides and my notes, really it's kind of my bucket list of scary castles that I want to go see. So let's get into it. And again, Paul, you will be proud of me. I have slides, so you guys don't have to look at just me. And you don't have to be entertained by just me. There is stuff on the screen to watch as well. But we are going to start with one of my favorite castles and a place that I want to go and visit desperately, and that is Houska Castle. And it is located in a remote area in the Czech Republic, north of Prague. It was built in the late 1200s during the reign of King Ottokar II. The castle itself, it is surrounded by dense forest, and it's a swampland, and it's just, location-wise, it's a really shitty location for a castle. It has no strategic value whatsoever. It just doesn't make sense. There's no water source nearby. There's no roads nearby. There's no transportation routes nearby. I've even heard at some points people talking about there's not even a kitchen in there, which would have been obviously a big deal back in the day. So it's really weird, kind of right from the start, from the get-go. It doesn't really make sense as a normal castle. So why was it built? It's a good question, and it's actually like the overall mystery surrounding Houska Castle is why was it built? Most castles are built for defense, or protection or political power. They're built for some purpose. And it really doesn't seem that there is a purpose for Houska Castle. Everything faces inward and not outward. It has very limited fortifications. And it appears that was built, and this actually is what they say on their website. Their best guess it appears that it was built to keep something in, not keep something out, or some people out, which is really creepy. Like, why would they need to do that? Well, I'll tell you why. So, buckle up, because here's the theory of it. And it is actually, the castle itself is built on top of a hole in the ground. Like, directly over a hole in the ground. And the legend says that it was built over the gates to hell. And they say that it is a bottomless pit, and that it's the gateway to hell. But then there's stories from going way back, before the castle was even built, of villagers and people in the area. They would hear screams coming from the hole, or they would see figures or shadows emerging from the hole, or half human and half animal entities. Like, it's actually the biggest thing that people had claimed to see coming out of the hole is half human, half animal entities, which is super freaky, but also really cool. So the people in the area literally believed that this was the portal to hell or to another realm completely. There is a story called the prisoner experiment story. And essentially what it was, because there was so much like rumor and gossip and hype locally about this pit, the nobles in the area at the time, they were offering condemned prisoners a deal that they would lower them down into this pit and then bring them back up. And then if they told everybody what they saw, they would get to go free. So according to the story, they found a prisoner that was willing to do this. They, tied a rope around his waist, started lowering him down into the hole, and kind of just when he got out of sight, they could hear him. He started screaming and calling for, let me up, please, let me up. So of course they didn't. They lowered him down a little bit more. But then it got to the point where it was getting really concerning for them. So they did actually start bringing him back up. And the legend says that when they pulled him out of the hole, his hair had turned white. He looked like he had aged 20 years, and that he had gone completely insane from whatever it was he'd seen down in the hole, which is such a creepy story, but I love it. The castle itself has a chapel, and it's actually the chapel that was constructed directly over the pit. So the whole castle was constructed over it, but they had purposefully put the chapel directly over the pit. And the paintings inside the chapel and all around the walls, they are paintings of demonic figures or really strange animals or unnatural creatures. And supposedly the purpose was to seal the hole, or seal whatever was down in the pit from being able to come out. So that's kind of the lore behind Houska Castle, but really even just itself, the strange architectural details about it. Again, like all the windows and stuff are facing inward. Like as you can see, like this is a view down into the castle, not down to the pit. And it just wasn't designed for normal living or for anyone to like actually live in this castle. So if that wasn't enough, there is more to this. It has changed, the Houska Castle has changed ownership a few times over the years. It was owned by a noble family, and then at one point it was actually a military outpost, and during World War II, it was actually occupied by Nazi forces. And there were rumors that the Nazis specifically chose Houska Castle because of this lore and because of that pit, and that they were testing a bunch of different occult experiments. And if you are familiar with the World War II Nazi conspiracy theories, they were really into looking for some kind of a supernatural enhancement or supernatural abilities in some way. But the paranormal activity that people report with Houska Castle, so people who go and visit the castle, because you can go visit it, they'll report seeing shadow figures, sudden drops in temperature, the feeling of being watched, which would just creep me out. But then there's also sightings. So people say they will see a headless black horse, or a faceless monk, or a frog-like, or actually a couple different types of these humanoid type creatures around there, which is just, it's creepy, and I love it so much. This is like one of my number one places on my bucket list to go check out because it is so cool. But the second one we're going to talk about is Moosham Castle. So Moosham Castle, and I hope I'm saying that right, Moosham Castle is probably considered one of the most haunted, if not the most haunted castle in the world, and there is good reason for this. It's located in Utternberg, Austria. It was built in the 13th century, and it's very isolated. It's surrounded by forests and mountains, as you can see, and it looks exactly like what you picture a dark medieval castle to look like. It's estimated to have seen around 45 gruesome battles on its grounds over the years, and it is also home to a very dark time in history, or I guess I should say it was part of a very dark time in history, which was in the 1600s during the witch trials. So during the 1600s, Europe was going through its own witch hysteria, and Moosham Castle actually became the center for a lot of witch trials. There were hundreds of people that were accused of witchcraft, and they were imprisoned or tortured and eventually executed. Many of them were either poor or outsiders, and even women and children. And it was several hundred of them were executed within the walls of Moosham Castle. Some of them were tortured. Tortured and interrogated prisoners were held in the castle's dungeon. They had a myriad of different torture methods that were used, which were just really gruesome. And then once you were, and like anything, even with the witch trials here in the United States, once you were accused, it was done. It was almost impossible to get off the list, I guess you could say. And so they would extract those confessions out of people, again, under extreme pain. If you guys are familiar with the Salem witch trials, it was pretty brutal what they would do to get people to confess. I know what you're thinking to yourself, Megan, that's a lot. Well, buckle up, because there's more. There is more involved in this. In the 1600s, along with the witch trials, there was a wave of fear that spread through this region. A bunch of cattle and livestock all around the area, they all started turning up dead, and they were either mutilated or had these injuries on them that people couldn't explain. So what did they do? They blamed it on werewolves, because why not? It's either werewolves, shapeshifters, or dark magic. That was what the only things they could come up with were those things. So it wasn't just witch trials that they actually also had werewolf trials as well. So people were accused of being werewolves. Many people were executed under these claims, and again, in really, really brutal, really graphic ways that I am not going to go into for this lunch hour one, but it was brutal. So Moosham really became known as this central location for these investigations, and then eventually these brutal executions of accused people. And really the aftermath of it is there was a shit ton of death at Moosham Castle, all in very, very brutal ways. Very brutal, not only just brutal, but I would say brutal and very unjust types of way. A lot of it was all just based off of fear and really no actual evidence that these people were witches or werewolves. So the castle itself is tied to this really dark history of just massive suffering. So of course, as you would about expect, there is quite a few paranormal reports. There's another view of Moosham. Again, it's just a creepy castle. I love it so much. So some of the paranormal reports from Moosham, one of the main spirits that is said to haunt the castle is that of Tony. Tony was actually the executioner at Moosham. My understanding is that Tony was a really mean guy. Not that, I'm sure that it wasn't the most lighthearted, fun-loving people that were chosen to be executioners. But again, if I remember correctly, and again, for these lunch hour ones, I don't do a ton of in-depth research because I just want to get, very surface-level stuff out there. But I have done stuff on Moosham in the past. If I remember correctly, this guy was like psycho. Like, he enjoyed this a lot. So there are lots of reports of hearing and seeing Tony, the executioner. I don't know if you guys can hear my dog crying, but that was perfect. It was this perfect dog cry in the background. But for paranormal reports, in addition to Tony, visitors report heavy and oppressive atmosphere, feeling watched, being suddenly uneasy in certain rooms. And then a lot of people have claimed to see shadows moving in the hall, or even just hearing strange sounds in empty areas. All around, it's just a haunted vibe. The next castle is another one of my favorites and one to go to, which is Leap Castle. So Leap Castle is located in County Offaly in Ireland. It was built in the 1200s, and it was originally owned by a very aggressive family called the O'Carroll clan. And it is itself known as one of the most haunted castles in Ireland. And while Moosham was haunted because of a lot of, I'd seen 45 battles, and, Houska has, the pit to hell. Leap is really said to be haunted because of the O'Carrolls, and just because of how brutal they were, but the main ones. So the O'Carroll family, again, they were very powerful, and they were a very violent clan, and they had a lot of internal power struggles between them, especially between the brothers. One of the brothers was a priest, and while he was in the chapel conducting mass, his other brother, or one of his other brothers, burst in and actually just murdered him at the altar. It was really gruesome, and that chapel then became known as the Bloody Chapel. So, one of the most disturbing parts about Leap Castle is actually the oubliette. And it's a hidden dungeon that was discovered behind a trap door. And oubliette is it's called the place. How ironic! The place of forgetting. I just forgot what it was called. The oubliette. If you are like me, you probably know of an oubliette because of the movie The Labyrinth. The oubliette is a place of forgetting. But this oubliette was horrifying because it was a deep pit lined with spikes, and anybody that was going in there was thrown in alive, and essentially they were just thrown in to be impaled on these spikes and then just left for dead. So it was a horrifying and gruesome way to die. When they eventually uncovered the oubliette later on, they actually took out cartloads of skeletons from the oubliette. So it was a lot like anybody they didn't want to hear from anymore was just discarded down the hole into the oubliette. And again, it's another one of the places that's just like centuries and centuries of violence. It wasn't just the O'Carrolls. There was a lot of other stuff that happened there too, but they are like the main source of the starting of the violence. The castle, again, changed hands many times, but it really kind of held its background or history or purpose: conflict, imprisonment, death, oubliette, a bunch of other not fun stuff. One of the kind of creepiest things that is associated with Leap Castle is it's said to have a type of paranormal entity called an elemental, it's described as a small hunched figure. It's dark, has a decaying face, and it smells like rotting flesh and sulfur. So it's super cute. A lot of people believe maybe it's not a ghost, but it's actually something like older than a ghost, or something completely different than like a spirit. But a lot of other paranormal activity that is associated with the place is full body apparitions, and they see them walking around the halls, shadow figures moving in between the rooms, sounds of movement when no one else is there, and then spirits that reportedly include people seeing the murdered priest, so the murdered brother, other members of the O'Carroll family, and then a lot of the unknown victims from the oubliette. So all in all, not a fun place. not a vacation spot, unless you're a weirdo like me and you do want to go there for a vacation, because I do want to see that. I love that type of stuff. And also just the history of it. The next one is the Tower of London. It's located in London, on the Thames River, on the River Thames. But it was built in 1066 by William the Conqueror, and it was originally meant as a fortress of symbol and power. However, over time, as one does, it became a prison, execution site, and then a place of interrogation and torture. You know, medieval Europeans would like to torture everybody. Same like with the witch trials and all that type of stuff. That's what it became with. But it was not just anybody was imprisoned there. The people that were imprisoned there were like nobles. It was like a hoity-toity prison. So like nobles, political enemies, royal family members. And then many of those prisoners were kept in isolation, used as political pawns, and then also really had no charges, like no actual, they weren't like charged with anything. Again, they were just kind of picked up and used as they please. And again, like a lot of stuff, if you were accused or thought they did something to you, or thought you did something and they brought you here, there was a very, very low chance that you were going to leave. Once you were there, you were most likely going to stay there. It's really known, the Tower of London is really known for like its executions and specifically its beheadings. Many executions took place at the Tower Green. Some of the most high-profile victims were Anne Boleyn and Lady Jane Grey. And beheading, the reason that there was a lot of beheading going on at the Tower of London is because it was actually considered a more merciful way to go than hanging or whatever other method they had at that time. So that was the reason it was so popular there, because of their high-class prisoners. They wanted to give them a noble death by beheading them. Anne Boleyn is probably the most, I would say, well-known or most high-profile individual that was executed there. She was the second wife of Henry VIII. She was accused of adultery and treason, and then she was executed in 1536. After her death, witnesses claimed that her ghost walks around the ground and that she carries her own head in her hands. So that is one of the most famous ghost stories. There is also an unsolved mystery associated with the Tower of London, and that is the mystery of the two princes. So the story says there were two young princes there, Edward V and his brother Richard. They were both locked in the tower in 1483, but then they disappeared. Nobody knew where they were. Nobody knew where they went. Their remains were later found, but was never definitively confirmed it was them. So it remains the debate, who killed them? Why? Where did they go? Again, torture wasn't common, although execution and beheading was common at Tower of London. Torture actually wasn't super common there, but it did happen, and it would usually happen for stuff like treason or espionage. And the methods would include stuff like the rack, so like physical torture, and then prolonged confinement, which was used to just mentally break somebody. The other thing associated with the Tower of London that I thought was pretty interesting is ravens. So apparently there's an omen about ravens. And the legend says that King Charles II, around 1600, he believed that there needed to be 6 ravens in the tower at all times. And the legend says that if the ravens were to ever leave the tower, the kingdom would fail. And there are actually still 6 ravens kept at the Tower of London today. They kept in captivity. See, they're treated significantly better today than they were then. But I did think that was very interesting. Even though a lot of, the stuff that you read A lot of the official stuff that you read about the Tower of London will, discredit that omen, but they do still keep 6 ravens there, which I thought was very interesting. The paranormal activities associated with the most haunted, or one of the most haunted locations in the UK, is reported sightings of the Headless Anne Boleyn, ghostly figures in white. Why are all the ghostly figures in white? That is a question I don't understand. Specifically, the lady in white. Why are all the ladies in white? It doesn't really matter where you go. If there's a ghost of a woman haunting a place, she's usually wearing white. I've never really understood that. There's also children's spirits associated with it, and then guards, so like trained guards that work there, have reported stuff like shadows, unexplained noises, and then figures appearing and disappearing in front of them. This next place, I actually didn't really know anything about. I had seen it before a couple times, but never really looked at the history of it. And again, I didn't do a ton of digging for this, but this is something I am going to do an episode on, because this place is cool because it is so creepy. It's Bhangarh Fort in India, and it is one of the most haunted places in India. It was built in the late 1500s for one of the sons of the ruler at the time. And it was once a thriving area. Like, it had its own markets, temples, and palaces. Like, it was a little city in there. But today, it is completely abandoned. One of the reasons is because people think it's cursed, which is really, really cool. There's 2 curses that are associated with the fort. The first one is the sorcerer's curse. So it's a local legend that says that there was a sorcerer named Singya. I believe that's how you pronounce that. But he became obsessed with the princess of Bhangarh, and he attempted to use black magic to make her fall in love with him. When she figured this out, she was pissed, obviously. So she had him killed. And as he died, he placed a curse on the fort that said the entire city would be destroyed and that no one would ever live there again. The other legend that is associated with it is that before the fort was built, there was a, I believe, like a monk or somebody who was living in that area using it to pray. And, when they came and they said, hey, do you mind if we build this place here? He was like, yeah, sure, no problem. But as long as you don't build anything that's going to like cast a shadow on my house, because like, I gotta use it for praying, and I would just really appreciate it if you guys didn't do that. And they were like, sure, we totally won't do that. So they built the fort, and as they were building the pillars, or adding pillars to the prince's like mansion, the pillars were high enough that they ended up casting a shadow over the monk's house, and then he cursed the city, and same thing, that the city would be destroyed and that nobody would ever be able to live there again. So whichever one you believe in, the city actually was, so not long after the curses, the town was reportedly attacked and destroyed. All the residents were either killed or they fled, and the area itself was never resettled again. So whether it is a part of the legend or the curse or coincidence, it is kind of creepy that the outcome matches the story. There's also a no roof rule, which essentially the local belief in the area is that any structure that is built, or if they've ever tried to build a structure in Bhangarh, it can't have a roof, because it says that once construction is complete on the building with the roof will almost immediately collapse. Which is creepy. Some paranormal reports. The paranormal reports are pretty, I think, standard. The standard paranormal reports. So visitors will report seeing, feeling uneasy, feeling watched, hearing footsteps in empty areas, hearing voices or whispers in the dusk, and then seeing figures amongst the ruins. It's said to get especially intense after sunset. The atmosphere, they say, during the day, it feels quiet, like a quiet historical site. But as evening approaches, the mood shifts entirely, and then any local that is there will leave very quickly, and tourists are warned not to stay. There are some skepticals explanations. So stuff, obviously like natural decay or abandonment, or really environmental stuff like wildlife or terrain. It's also next to a tiger preserve, which could also explain why people get a little creeped out there. But then also just, the explanation that it is just folklore passed down and people will just freak themselves out. However, there is a government warning sign that is real. The Archaeological Survey of India posted an official sign that says that no one is allowed inside the fort after sunset or before sunrise. And the reason given is safety concerns. But I think locals in the area, people say it is because of the paranormal activity. This is one of the only places in the world that has like an official do not enter at night rule tied to it because of its reputation. Obviously, places have do not enter at night, like don't trespass, that type of stuff. But this one specifically because of its reputation, which I think is pretty cool. So those are the 5 castles with disturbing histories that we're talking about today. Thank you so much for watching. If you like it, please give this a like. I would greatly appreciate it. If you want to hear more stories like this, come back tomorrow at noon. We're going to talk about it again. And if you have anything in particular that you would like to hear, just leave it in the comments. I'm up for any kind of topic. If you want me to go into some kind of a deep dive, let me know too. That's what I'll be doing later. I won't be doing kind of the surface level stuff after Friday. But thank you again for watching. We'll see you here tomorrow at 12 p.m. Central Time for another disturbing lunch hour. So